I asked you to tell me what you thought inflation would be at the end of this year, and you told me 2%. Do you still stand by that prediction? Senator Schumer, who's a Democrat, and my friend, controls the Senate floor. And he can raise the debt ceiling by just amending the budget resolution, can't he? Your perspective, but let me ask you again. There's a real simple solution. Why don't y'all just amend the budget resolution?
In a high-profile and often tense exchange, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a Republican known for his sharp wit and direct style, questioned Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen during a Senate hearing. The discussion highlighted two major and politically sensitive issues facing the United States: inflation and the debt ceiling. While seemingly technical topics, these are deeply tied to broader political struggles over government spending, fiscal responsibility, and economic leadership. The hearing took place during a period of economic uncertainty. Inflation was running higher than anticipated, causing concern among Americans facing rising costs for everyday essentials, from groceries to gas. At the same time, the federal government was approaching its statutory debt limit, the cap set by Congress on how much the U.S. Treasury is allowed to borrow to pay for already authorized spending. Without action to raise or suspend the debt ceiling, the U.S. would risk defaulting on its financial obligations, a potentially catastrophic outcome that could ripple across global markets.
I asked you to tell me what you thought inflation would be at the end of this year, and you told me 2%. Do you still stand by that prediction?
Clearly, inflation this year is going to be above 2%. Just the experience so far this year makes that clearly true. But I think we are seeing monthly inflation rates taper off.
Yes, ma'am. What do you think it'll be at the end of the year, if not 2%?
Probably closer to 4%.
Okay.
And that's already almost must be the case based on what's happened this year. But in my estimation, there are the types of supply bottlenecks that the economy.
I don't want to spend too much time on inflation, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have so little time, and I talk slowly. What party controls the House?
The Democrats.
What party controls the Senate?
The Democrats.
I believe we can agree that President Biden is a Democrat.
I believe.
Okay. Senator Schumer, who's a Democrat, and my friend, controls the Senate floor. And he can raise the debt ceiling by just amending the budget resolution, can't he?
It's possible that that could be done.
Yes, ma'am. So why didn't he do it? Why don't y'all do it?
Because
and then
this
we
is,
don't. Let me
because
just
this is.
Let me just finish. Why don't y'all just do it and then we don't have this fight?
Because
why do you insist on doing it the hard way?
Because it's very important to recognize that raising the debt ceiling is about paying bills that Congresses have incurred in the past, and it's a shared responsibility.
So why don't you? I agree with that. So why don't you just amend the budget resolution?
Democrats have provided votes in the past when both houses of Congress are controlled by Republicans, when the Republican Party was in the middle of reconciliation. Right. 2017 is a good example, and Democrats pitched in to do their duty to raise the debt ceiling.
But I know all that, and and I appreciate your perspective, but let me ask you again. There's a real simple solution. Why don't y'all just amend the budget resolution?
At the time of this hearing, Democrats controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House, making them the majority party in Washington. However, raising the debt ceiling has historically been a politically toxic move, no matter which party is in control. Because of this, both parties often try to shift the responsibility to the other side. Republicans argue that Democrats should raise the limit alone, especially since they are pushing major spending initiatives. Democrats, meanwhile, contend that the debt ceiling relates to past obligations, many of which were incurred under previous Republican leadership, and should therefore be a shared, bipartisan responsibility. Senator Kennedy begins by following up on an earlier hearing where Secretary Yellen had predicted inflation would remain around 2%. Now, with actual inflation tracking higher, he presses her on that forecast. Yellen concedes that the number will likely be closer to 4%, citing ongoing supply chain disruptions and other post-pandemic challenges. This exchange reflects broader concerns about the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department's ability to manage inflation, which affects everything from interest rates to consumer purchasing power. The bulk of the exchange focuses on the debt ceiling and how to raise it. Senator Kennedy suggests a clear procedural path. Democrats could use budget reconciliation, which requires only 50 votes in the Senate, plus the vice president's tie-breaking vote, to raise the limit without any Republican support. He questions why Democrats aren't doing this, implying it's a political strategy. They want Republican cooperation so they can later claim bipartisan support for their economic agenda. Secretary Yellen responds diplomatically, insisting that the debt ceiling should not be a partisan issue because the need to raise it stems from past decisions by both parties. She also expresses concern about the economic consequences of default, which would undermine global confidence in U.S. financial commitments. What makes this exchange notable is not just the substance, but the tone. Senator Kennedy's blunt, questioning style contrasts with Secretary Yellen's measured, policy-oriented responses. The hearing lays bare the deep partisan divisions on how to handle economic governance in Washington, especially at a time when the country faces massive fiscal challenges. The issues of inflation and the debt ceiling are not abstract. They impact millions of Americans. High inflation erodes wages and savings, while a debt ceiling crisis could stall Social Security checks, raise borrowing costs, and even trigger a financial meltdown. This hearing, and others like it, give the public a window into how such crucial decisions are debated and often delayed by political strategy and party loyalty.
It just takes 50 votes by my Democratic friends and the vice president. Why don't you just do that? Problem solved. Done. Easy peasy. Finished. Let's go have a cocktail.
Well, it will be up to the leadership of Congress to
Were you going to recommend that he do that?
We will confer with them on what is the best strategy to move forward.
Yeah. It's not often, I haven't been around this place as long as you have. But it's not often around here that we have a problem that has an easy solution. And this is a real easy solution. And I get politics. I understand why politically you folks want to have Republican fingerprints on the spending fiscal knife. I get that. But do you really, is your politics so important that you want to gamble here on the sovereign debt of the United States when you have a very, very simple solution that you refuse to take?
I want to see that the debt ceiling is raised. As I've said, I believe it would be catastrophic not to do so, but I equally believe that deficits have been run under both Democratic and Republican administrations. It's important to recognize that and that means that paying the bills for those deficits is a shared responsibility, and it should not be the responsibility
I agree
of
with
any
that.
one party.
Very eloquently put. But it's a fact, isn't it? That you and your folks just want Republican fingerprints on the Democrats' effort to tax, spend, and regulate America into Europe. Now, it's your prerogative to do that. But this is all about the administration's desire to have Republican fingerprints on it and later call it bipartisan. And you know that, Madam Secretary, with all the respect I can muster, and so do the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy, I rarely speak between witnesses, but I wonder if Secretary Yellen takes you up on the offer to go get a cocktail, if you would pay or you'd skip out on paying the bill and expect Secretary Yellen to pay. Senator Menendez is recognized from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had not intended to pursue this line of questioning, but I must say my distinguished friend and colleague from Louisiana always sparks my interest. The Republican